Whenever people get together and interact and take drugs, it potentiates the toxicity of the drug experience. And you're going to see this summer a new concept of health problem, that is a great deal of violence coming out.
What if there was a recipe for changing society's mind?
Hostile actions against United States ships on the high seas and the Gulf of Tonkin
that started with a disaster, disaffected millions, and benefited just a few.
As you all know by now, my name is Oliver North.
Saddam Hussein has gone to elaborate lengths to build and keep weapons of mass destruction.
What if below the big block print headlines that history is remembered by,
Rap star Tupac Shakur died last night.
Complications from several
sticky little asterisks, footnotes, and asides could show a pattern that goes beyond coincidence and into conspiracy?
Welcome to Illuminati headquarters.
10 American scientists have died.
Fourth Point of View presents Charles Manson, the CIA, and the Swan Song of Flower Power, Part 2.
Tell me in a sentence who you are.
Nobody. I'm nobody. I'm a tramp, a bum, a hobo. I'm a boxcar and a jug of wine. And a straight razor if you get too close to me.
Charles Manson had a superpower. Between 1967 and 1969, he was immune to incarceration. There wasn't a police department, a courtroom, or a jail that could hold Charles Manson back from becoming the most notorious cult leader in American history. So who was helping Charles Manson, a felon on parole, stay out of jail? And did they know that Charles Manson was using mind control on his followers to reprogram them into homicidal robots? And who taught Charles Manson, a barely literate ex-convict with a 5th grade education, how to use mind control? If you were to thumb through every page of transcript for the People vs. Manson trial, you'd notice there was no mention whatsoever of Charles Manson's parole officer, Roger Smith. That's because between 1967 and 1969, Charles Manson violated his parole 15 times. And his parole officer, Roger Smith, the man with his hand on the lever to the trap door, was a little gun-shy. Roger Smith didn't just refuse to revoke Manson's parole. He wrote numerous letters to the head parole office in Washington, D.C., raving about Manson's good behavior. In a report dated July 31st, 1967, Roger Smith wrote, "He appears to be in better shape personally than he has been in a long time." The only problem with that statement is that while Roger Smith was typing that letter, his parolee, Charles Manson, was in jail. At the time of his career as a parole officer, Roger Smith was a grad student at UC Berkeley studying criminology. He was considered an expert on gangs, collective behavior, violence, and drugs. He conducted multiple studies in San Francisco, using the participant observer approach to his research, embedding himself in the Oakland slums. Roger Smith was also part of the Amphetamine Research Project, or ARP, which was a study on the use of amphetamines among the hippie counterculture in the Haight-Ashbury district. So here we have Roger Smith, Charles Manson's parole officer, who also studies drug violence by embedding himself with his test subjects. But he never writes a paper on Charles Manson, his drug use, or how he used mind control to amass a cult. Isn't that strange? Perhaps the greatest research paper on drug violence of all time was sitting just under Roger Smith's nose, passing in and out of his office weekly for parole check-ins. Roger Smith is an expert on gangs, violence, and drugs. And Charles Manson was the head of a gang who used violence and drugs. But there's no paper, no study, no footnote connect Roger Smith's research to Charles Manson. But there is another researcher who observed Charles Manson's use of drugs and mind control on his followers. And that researcher was right down the hall from the office Roger Smith used to meet with Manson every week. You see, rather than meet with Charles Manson in an office filled with parole officers, Roger Smith met with Charles Manson in the office where he conducted his amphetamine research, which was in the Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Clinic. Manson could come in for weekly parole check-ins with Roger Smith, while his band of mostly female followers received free medical attention. The clinic's founder, Dr. David Smith, never received his PhD in pharmacology, but he did conduct an extensive 2-year study shooting rats up with amphetamines and LSD. He skipped his dissertation and opened the Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Clinic in San Francisco and continued his research with LSD and amphetamines, but without the rats. David Smith published numerous articles about LSD and counterculture and published a memoir titled Love Needs Care in 1971. In his memoir, Smith chronicled the Manson family's frequent trips to the clinic. David also wrote in great detail about Charles Manson's use of mind control on his followers, a recipe of LSD and unconventional sexual practices that would break his followers down for reprogramming. Treating the girls like objects, he eroded their independence, turning them into self-acknowledged computers.
Whenever people get together and interact and take drugs, it potentiates the toxicity of the drug experience, and you're going to see this summer a new concept of health problem, that is a higher incidence of adverse drug reactions, and unless these situations are handled properly, you're going to see a great deal of violence coming out.
So did Roger Smith, the guy keeping Charles Manson out of jail, know he was using mind control? The guy down the hall sure did. But who taught Charles Manson how to use mind control? Who taught you how to do this stuff? What if I told you there was another researcher down the hall from Roger and David Smith, who cut his teeth studying mind control in the 1950s, rehabilitating US POWs who'd been brainwashed by communist ideology, whose resume included killing an elephant with LSD, being part of the CIA's MK-Ultra mind control program, and being the last person to see Jack Ruby right before he had a psychotic breakdown. Dr. Louis Jolly West was at the forefront of mind control and LSD research. In his 1956 proposal titled Psychological Studies of Hypnosis and Suggestibility, West claimed he could replace true memories with false ones in human beings through hypnotic suggestion and unspecified drugs.
We're at war today. People are dying, are being tortured and raped and suffering in a war that is essentially a war between a free way of life and communist tyranny.
And here's where it gets weird. You see, a lot of Jolly West's research and papers that he wrote over the years before 1967, before Charles Manson is released from prison, almost seem to predict Charles Manson and the Manson family. In 1965, Jolly West published the paper Dangers of Hypnosis, which predicted the dangers of cults who hypnotize their followers to commit violent criminal acts. In 1967, Jolly West grew his hair out and relocated to the Haight-Ashbury district, where he opened up a fake hippie crash pad to study LSD and the psychedelic counterculture. He filled a dilapidated apartment with lava lamps, groovy posters, those annoying beads hanging in doorways, and a small team of grad students dressed like hippies to observe and report the far-out experiences of drug users. To recruit test subjects for his experiments, Jolly West took an office in the Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Clinic, right down the hall from Dr. David Smith, who chronicled Manson's use of mind control, and Roger Smith, the parole officer who frequently kept Manson out of jail.
When you're in a war and you're committed and you're fighting for something you really believe in, people have to make sacrifices. They have to do things sometimes that's uncomfortable for them.
While no one can say for certain that Jolly West, a researcher and psychiatrist for the CIA, taught Charles Manson mind control, it's an unbelievable coincidence that the two were constantly in the same building. This is like your roommate throwing himself a secret birthday party while you're at work. Not that that's ever happened to me. That's like finding out a global pandemic originated from a town with a virology lab that had the same name. It's almost too easy to draw a conclusion. A pattern is emerging. Too many sticky little asterisks, footnotes, and asides are making connections that go beyond coincidence and into conspiracy. Be sure to subscribe to our channel, Fourth Point of View. And if you've got a subject you'd like us to tackle, don't forget to hit us up in the comments.